Joker Folie Deux is a bad movie, a bad sequel, and a bad musical. But it's not bad because it's a musical. A lot of people online are going to say that having the Joker sing was an inherently bad idea, but I fundamentally disagree. Musical numbers have always been a great way to delve into the psychology of a character, and this iteration of the Joker was supposed to give us meaningful insight into who the clown really is. Conceptually, Joker the musical makes more sense than a lot of people might think, but unfortunately, the execution was objectively terrible. So today, we're going to break down specifically why Joker 2 is a bad musical. And, like the victim of a terrible motorcycle accident, this video comes to you in 3 parts. The first issue I have is that Joker 2 never answers the simplest yet most important question in any musical. Why are we singing? In the case of a stage musical, the answer is pretty straightforward. When a character becomes so emotional that speaking is no longer adequate, they break into song to properly express their emotions. In the case of a screen musical, this can be a little more complicated. Since moviegoers are less accepting of people just breaking out into song, it helps if you can clearly designate a thematic reason for singing. In The Greatest Showman, for instance, songs occur whenever Hugh Jackman is putting on a performance. Sometimes it's a literal performance.
Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've waited for.
Sometimes it's more about theater of the mind.
'Cause every night I lie in bed, the brightest colors fill my head.
And my favorite is when his personality is the performance, and he's trying to persuade Zac Efron.
Right here, right now, I put the offer out.
In the case of Joker, I think the answer they were trying to set up is the title. Aside from being a lovely brand of Chardonnay, Folie Deux is a French expression that refers to a shared delusion between two people. In Joker 2, that delusion is shared between the Joker and Harley Quinn, and I think that the filmmakers intended for the musical numbers to represent that delusion. See, the first act takes place in Arkham Asylum and focuses on Arthur and Harley falling in love. Their relationship begins when Arthur joins a music class, so you think this would be an easy way to set up what singing means in terms of their relationship and the overall narrative. But the first musical number doesn't happen in the class or with Harley. Instead, it's in this scene from the trailer, after Arthur finds out he might be facing the death penalty. Technically, he is thinking of Harley, but nothing explains why he's suddenly okay with expressing himself through song. If Arthur sat down with a music teacher or Harley, and they explained to him that singing is a way of connecting with our true selves, then him deciding to sing would feel logical and represent progress in his character arc. The movie later tries to imply that these musical sequences represent Arthur embracing his Joker persona, but it falls flat because of how poorly singing was established as a narrative device. On top of this, most of Harley and Joker's musical numbers are done solo. The whole premise was that this is a shared delusion, so logically, most of the songs should have been duets. Speaking of the songs, this movie also fails to justify why they used the specific songs they did. Like Mamma Mia, Joker 2 is a jukebox musical, but unlike Mamma Mia, the implication is that all the songs they sing actually exist within their universe. This is theoretically fine, but it means that you should set up how the characters know these songs and why they're so important to them. The only song we actually set up in advance is That's Entertainment, but Harley, who later sings the number, wants to leave when the scene is being shown and doesn't have any actual attachment to the music. I think an easy way to justify the songs would be to copy what James Gunn did in Guardians of the Galaxy. Sure, we don't hear most of the songs before the main needle drops, but we do set up that every song in the movie's soundtrack is important to our main character. We know that the awesome mixtapes represent Peter's connection with Earth and his mother, so anytime a song plays, it's automatically more impactful. If we just saw a montage of Harley singing songs to Arthur or listening to the radio with him, it would make the musical numbers feel much less random. On both an overarching and individual level, the movie never seems to be able to answer, why are we singing? Which inherently begs the question, why is this a musical? My second issue is that the movie is terrible at transitioning into the musical numbers. Normally, good musicals do what's called a vamp, where you start playing a small portion of the music in the background before the characters actually begin to sing.
Right here, right now.
This creates a smooth transition that feels more natural than just bursting into song unprompted. Sometimes the vamp is non-diegetic, like in La La Land. And sometimes it's diegetic, like in Journey to Bethlehem.
And if he's none of those things, he'll still be my husband.
Mary, you're getting married.
Bad musicals, like the Disney remakes, don't vamp at all, so the singing feels jarring and awkward. And then there's Joker, which does something even worse.
For once
in my life.
Anytime Arthur is about to transition into a song, he starts to timidly speak sing in a way that is as obnoxious as it is off key.
This is what dreams are made of.
And even worse, they make Lady Gaga sound just as pitchy when she starts to sing.
Sing hallelujah. Come on, get happy.
Now, clearly this is a stylistic decision.
But given that it's a stupid-ass decision, I've elected to ignore it.
First, this raises a lot of questions about how diegetic the singing is within the narrative. After the first musical sequence, we cut back to Arthur staring at the TV in silence, implying that even the bad a cappella singing was all in his head. But then when he's interviewed by Steve Coogan, the implication is that the singing is witnessed by other people. Now, in reality, he might just be talking to the interviewer normally, and Harley is the only one who hears it as a song, but that still doesn't match up with the logic established by the previous musical numbers. Speaking of Harley, sometimes her duets with Joker are actually her, like when the two run around Arkham together, and other times it's just Arthur thinking about Harley, like in this scene where she ends up shooting Joker. But if musical sequences can include people who aren't actually there, then why doesn't Harley appear in the first musical number when Arthur is literally singing about how much he loves her? Secondly, the pitchy speak singing says to me that the creators of this movie were embarrassed to be making a musical. The only reason you make Lady Gaga sound this bad at the start of a song is to ground the musical elements in quote-unquote reality. Filmmakers that don't understand musicals often try to use diegetic singing to placate audiences who are new to the genre, but this misses the entire point of musicals as a medium. Musical numbers aren't about actual reality, but rather the emotional reality of the character. Putting awful sounding vocals at the beginning of each song just serves to disconnect audiences from the emotional reality of the movie and make people cringe. I do think that if the filmmakers were dead set on these awkward intros, they should have just committed to a literal interpretation of reality. If instead of watching elaborate fantasy sequences, the camera just held on the characters singing without any music, the movie would be incredibly hard to watch, but it would at least be artistically consistent. But as is, the movie not only wastes Harley Quinn as a character, but also wastes the vocal talents of Lady Gaga. Finally, let's talk about the musical numbers themselves. Clearly, Todd Phillips does not understand how musicals work because these sequences are the worst thing in an already awful movie. The first issue is that the filmmakers don't understand what songs in a musical are actually supposed to accomplish. Just like any other scene in a narrative, musical numbers should advance either the plot or the character arcs in meaningful ways. In Wonka, the song Sweet Tooth is all about how the villains convince a police officer to beat up Timothée Chalamet. He starts off being morally opposed to the idea,
Keep your wretched chocolates!
but as the verses progress, he slowly gives in and accepts the cartel's bribe.
1,800 boxes? Oh, deal.
In Hamilton, the rivalry between Aaron and Alexander comes to a head in the song
Your obedient servant.
Burr gives Hamilton a chance to apologize,
Answer for the accusations I lay at your feet, or prepare to bleed, good man.
but when Hamilton refuses,
I stand by what I said, every bit of it.
it prompts Burr to challenge him to a duel.
We hawking. Dawn. Guns. Drawn.
You're wrong.
In under 3 minutes, violence has gone from a possibility to a guarantee. But what changes during the songs in Joker? Most of the time, nothing. Songs like For Once in My Life and That's Entertainment just see the characters walk around as the camera follows them without any major development for the character or the plot. Other songs like If You Go Away allow the narrative to progress, but only because we see a montage of other things happening. The song might as well be non-diegetic because they're really just using it as background noise. The narrative wouldn't change if there was no music playing during this sequence. The Joker and To Love Somebody are the only two sequences that really progress the character arcs, but even then, these are done quite poorly. When Arthur sings the Joker, it's a sequence in his head that culminates in him embracing his persona, singing, "The Joker is me." But first of all, this doesn't make sense for his character arc. At the end of the movie, Arthur admits that there never was a Joker. Not that he doesn't want to be the Joker anymore, but that he never actually embraced the persona. So for him to embrace the persona at the midpoint of the movie is a change that doesn't line up with what we're told in the finale. The movie was trying to imply that he puts on the persona to appease Harley, but then the sequence should have been about their relationship. It should have played out when Harley talks to him in his jail cell, not when he's sitting in the courtroom. Secondly, aside from the final declaration, very little actually happens during this musical number. We just see Joker shoot the cameraman and beat the judge with a gavel. Like good dialogue scenes, good musical numbers have constant conflict. The tension should ebb and flow throughout the sequence in order to keep the audience engaged. Looking once more at A Lovely Night, the song constantly shifts between the characters hinting at their feelings for one another.
We stumbled on a view that's tailor-made for two.
And denying that they have any chemistry.
But I'm frankly feeling nothing.
Is that so?
The whole number feels alive and energetic because there's an actual narrative playing out while they sing, but the numbers in the Joker are narratively static, which is why many people feel like the movie is wasting their time. Also, quick side note, this sequence shows just how hypocritical the filmmakers are. They pretend like this is a movie that critiques the media's glorification of violence, and then include a 3-minute sequence focused exclusively on gratuitous violence. Just like the first Joker, this movie talks about a lot of controversial subjects, but doesn't actually have anything to say. It uses ambiguity to mask the fact that these films have no depth. They rely on audience interpretation to add depth, which is the definition of pretentious filmmaking. Jumping back to the musical numbers, To Love Somebody is a little bit more dynamic than the Joker, but not by much. During this sequence, Joker and Harley perform the duet, but Joker gets mad when Harley starts singing to the audience rather than to him. She apologizes, and they start singing again, until Harley pulls a gun on the Joker and shoots him. There's some interesting symbolism here, and it ties into Arthur's growing distrust of Harley, but Lady Gaga's whole character is so poorly written throughout the movie that it's impossible for this moment to pay off in a meaningful way. It also brings to light yet another issue with being a jukebox musical. Part of why musicals normally use original songs is so that they can fit naturally into the narrative. In Descendants, Evil Like Me perfectly captures the inner conflict Evie is facing, and effectively develops her relationship with her mom. If this were a jukebox musical, it would be almost impossible to find a song that did all of that. In a good jukebox musical like Mamma Mia, the characters and story are actually written around the songs. The whole reason Tanya is a cougar is so that she has a reason to sing Does Your Mother Know?
Yeah, girls. We done good.
The whole reason Rosie and Bill aren't together at the start of Mamma Mia 2 is so that she can sing Angel Eyes with Christine Baranski.
One night, I was taking a walk along the river.
But in the case of Joker, you could replace most of these songs with anything that had a similar vibe. Arthur needs a song about love after meeting Harley, but it didn't need to be For Once in My Life. And given the genre of music that they're using, the lyrics really don't tell much of a story. Many of these jazz and show tunes are more about sitting in a single vibe or emotion rather than progressing a narrative. They don't reference most of these songs existing already, so why not just write original music? The other big issue with the musical numbers is how they relate to one another. One of my favorite aspects of La La Land is that the type and frequency of music changes along with the character arcs. At the beginning, when our leads fully believe in the magic of Hollywood, we get bombastic MGM-style musical numbers. When they start focusing more on their relationship than on their career, we shift to more intimate ballads and dreamy dances. When Sebastian stops pursuing his dream, the songs become exclusively diegetic. And when Sebastian realizes, all too late, that Neil was his real dream, we get the fantasy ballet that ends the film. But the Joker sequences don't build on one another. They should get more elaborate as Arthur loses touch with reality, but instead, we randomly alternate between big fantasy set pieces and singing in what appears to be real life. On top of this, the movie seems to forget that the music is supposed to represent Harley and Joker's shared delusion. At the end of the film, after Arthur has denounced his Joker persona, he finds Harley outside his apartment. He asks her to run away with him, but she only cares about the Joker, not Arthur. As she puts it, Arthur gave up on their dream, and therefore the two cannot be together. Harley then starts to sing, while Arthur begs her to stop. In this moment, we realize that their Folie Deux was actually two separate delusions. Arthur believed Harley loved him, and Harley believed that Arthur was the Joker. But with this in mind, shouldn't the roles be reversed? Arthur still loves Harley, and that love is what put a song in his heart. Conversely, if Harley's dream about the Joker has been shattered, shouldn't she be the one who has no interest in singing? To make matters worse, they actually did do that a few minutes earlier. When Arthur calls Harley and she doesn't pick up the phone, he sings "If You Go Away." He's essentially pouring his heart out to her, while she ignores him and contemplates ending her own life. She has no reason to sing, and from her point of view, no reason to exist anymore. But then just a few scenes later, we Uno reverse all of that. It just shows how the filmmakers can't commit to anything. They make contradictory decisions for the sake of an edgy aesthetic, rather than trying to make a cohesive narrative. And the film suffers constantly because of this. Overall, I'm not surprised that The Joker 2 was bad, and if it were just a bad movie, I could move on. But it's also a bad movie musical. Hollywood is already biased enough against my favorite genre. There's a reason trailers for films like Mean Girls and Wicked never explicitly show anyone singing. The film industry is embarrassed by musicals simply because they don't understand them. And because they don't understand them, they're likely to see the failure of this movie and blame it on the genre rather than the terrible filmmaking. I always thought that Joker 1 was more style than substance, but it at least felt like it was made with passion. Folie, Deux, on the other hand, feels like it was made to spite itself. It has no love for the source material, no love for the movie it's a sequel to, and no love for the genre it appropriates with reckless abandon. So, for the people who might be new to musicals that watch this movie, I promise you, this does not represent what movie musicals can or should be. And I'm sorry you had to see this. I'm Dylan, and this is The Writer's Block.